Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Genesis chapter 24 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's just dive right into this incredibly fascinating text. Genesis chapter 24 is actually the longest chapter in the entire book of Genesis. It comes in at a massive 67 verses. But here's the thing, it's not some dry list of laws or a confusing genealogy. Not at all. It's this epic, highly detailed narrative of a faithful servant who is sent out on a literally monumental mission. We're going to explore this whole story together, and we are focusing entirely on what's called the pashhat. That is the literal, straightforward meaning of the text. So get comfortable because we are going to walk through this beautifully constructed story of faith, character, and divine providence verse by verse.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the context and the oath. Second, the test at the well. Third, meeting the family. Fourth, the return to Isaac. Then we'll do some clarifications and look at the key ideas. And finally, we'll wrap up with some practical life lessons.
All right, Section 1, Context and the Oath. Finding Isaac's wife. Let's get right into it.
So, to set the scene for you here, Abraham is getting really up there in years. He's an old man now. His beloved wife Sarah has passed away, and his son of promise Isaac is still unmarried. The entire future of Abraham's lineage, everything God promised him, depends entirely on finding a proper wife for Isaac. It's a huge deal. So Abraham calls in his chief servant. This is the oldest, most trusted servant in his household, the guy in charge of literally everything Abraham owns. And in verses 1 through 4, Abraham sets a very strict boundary. He makes the servant swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that he absolutely will not get a wife for Isaac from the daughters of the Canaanites. That's the local people they're living among. No. Instead, the servant has to travel all the way back to Abraham's home country, back to his own relatives, to find the right wife. Abraham is absolutely 100% determined to keep his family distinct from the local Canaanite culture and their religion.
And to really show you the gravity of this situation, in verse 2, Abraham tells his servant, "Put your hand under my thigh." Now, I know, to our modern ears that sounds totally bizarre, right? But if we look at the literal historical context of the ancient Near East, this was a highly recognized, deeply solemn custom for swearing an oath. Because it involved a patriarchal source of life, placing a hand under the thigh was a way of binding yourself to a promise with the utmost severity. It was basically invoking your future descendants or swearing on your very life. It meant, listen, this is a matter of life and death, and this promise must not be broken under any circumstances. Moving right along into verses 5 through 9, the servant, who is clearly a very practical, thinking man, asks a highly valid question. He says, "Okay, but what if the woman is unwilling to come back with me to this land? Should I then take your son back to the country you came from?" It makes sense, right? But Abraham's response is an emphatic, strict no. He says, "Make sure that you do not take my son back there." Abraham explains that God promised to give this specific land of Canaan to his offspring. So Isaac has to remain in the promised land, no compromises. And Abraham is so incredibly confident in this mission that he assures the servant, God will send an angel before you. He even gives the guy a release clause. If the woman just flat out refuses to follow, the servant is officially free from the oath. He did his best. So, with those crystal clear parameters set, the servant puts his hand under Abraham's thigh and swears the oath.
On to Section 2, the test at the well, a divine sign.
Okay, the servant is now completely packed and ready. He's making this massive geographical transition, leaving Canaan and making the long, hard trek northeast toward Mesopotamia, heading specifically to the city of Abraham's brother, Nahor. In verses 10 through 14, the text gives us some incredible detail. The servant takes 10 of his master's camels, fully loaded with all sorts of good things, and he sets out for Aram Naharim. He finally arrives outside the town of Nahor right toward evening. And you know what happens in the evening? That's exactly the time the local women go out to draw water. So he stops there and he does something really remarkable. He prays for a sign. But notice, it's not some mystical, magical sign. It is a highly specific, character-based test. He prays, "O Lord, God of my master Abraham, give me success today." Then he lays out his plan. He's going to ask a maiden for a drink from her jar. If she says, "Drink, and I'll draw water for your camels too," let her be the one God has chosen for Isaac. Think about how clever this guy is. He isn't asking for lightning from the sky. He is specifically looking for a woman who possesses unprompted hospitality, genuine kindness, and an absolutely phenomenal work ethic. And wow, what happens next in verses 15 through 21 unfolds just like a movie scene, literally. Before he even finishes praying in his heart, Rebekah comes out with her jar on her shoulder. The text notes she is incredibly beautiful. She goes down to the spring, fills her jar, and comes back up. The servant hurries over to meet her and just asks for a little water. Without skipping a beat, she says, "Drink, my lord," and quickly lowers her jar. And then, wait for it, comes the magic moment. She looks at him and says, "I'll draw water for your camels too," until they have finished drinking. The text says she quickly emptied her jar into the watering trough and then ran back to the well to draw enough for all 10 camels. Guys, we really cannot gloss over this. 10 thirsty camels, especially after a long desert journey, can drink hundreds of gallons of water. Hundreds. This was an immense, back-breaking physical effort. And all the while, the servant just watches her closely, completely silent, just waiting to see if God has truly made his journey successful.
So, the crucial turning point happens in verses 22 through 27. When the camels finally finish drinking, the servant knows she has passed the test with flying colors. So he takes out a gold nose ring weighing a beka, which, to put it in perspective, is about 1/5 of an ounce, and 2 heavy gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels for her arms. And then he asks her the golden question, "Whose daughter are you? And hey, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She smiles and replies that she is the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah and Nahor. Bingo! She is Abraham's direct relative. It's a perfect match. Upon hearing this incredible news, the servant immediately bows down to the ground and worships the Lord. He openly praises God for leading him straight to the house of his master's relatives.
Now we move into section 3, meeting the family, Laban and Bethuel.
Transitioning indoors now, verses 28 through 33 show us the dynamic of Rebekah's household. The girl runs home and tells her mother's household everything that just happened. Her brother Laban hears the story, but the text makes a very specific point here. Laban saw the gold nose ring and the heavy gold bracelets on his sister's arms. Seeing all this wealth, Laban hurries out to the spring to find the man. He's incredibly welcoming, saying, "Come, you who are blessed by the Lord. Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house." So they bring the servant in, they unload the camels, give them straw and fodder, and set a big meal before the men. But here, the servant shows absolute, single-minded dedication to his mission. He looks at this amazing food and says, "Nope, I will not eat until I have told you what I have to say."
What follows in verses 34 through 49 is just a masterclass in persuasion. It's a dense, brilliant narrative recap by the servant. He doesn't just walk in and ask for Rebekah's hand. He builds an airtight, undeniable case of divine providence. He starts right off by establishing his credentials. "I am Abraham's servant." Then he lists out how wildly wealthy God has made Abraham: sheep, cattle, silver, gold, the works. He mentions that Sarah had a son in her old age, and that son inherits everything. Then he explains the solemn oath he took not to take a Canaanite wife. After that, he walks them through the exact, specific test he prayed for at the well, and how Rebekah matched it perfectly before he even finished speaking the words in his heart. The servant brilliantly lays all these facts out on the table and concludes with a direct, unavoidable challenge. "Now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me. And if not, tell me so I may know which way to turn."
And this brings us right to verses 50 through 54, highlighting a fascinating contrast in the room. Laban and Bethuel are just completely overwhelmed by the sheer evidence of the story. They look at each other and answer, "This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here's Rebekah, take her and go." When the servant hears this, what does he do? He bows to the ground again in gratitude. He brings out even more gold and silver jewelry, clothing for Rebekah, and costly gifts for her brother and mother. The deal is sealed. And only after all that is done does he finally sit down to eat and drink. But notice the servant's intense urgency here. They spend the night, and the very next morning he stands up and says, "Send me on my way to my master." He flat out refuses to linger or take a vacation now that the mission is accomplished.
Section 4. The return to Isaac, the journey home. So the agreement is made, but the actual departure brings one last moment of tension before our bride and groom finally get to meet. In verses 55 through 60, we see the family start to hesitate. The mother and brother are saying, "Wait, let the girl remain with us 10 days or so." And it's completely natural. They are basically saying goodbye forever. But the servant is resolute. "Do not detain me, now that the Lord has granted success to my journey." So the family decides to call Rebekah in and let her decide for herself. They ask her straight up, "Will you go with this man?" And Rebekah displays incredible agency and courage here. She gives a simple, decisive answer, "I will go," just like that. With that, they send her off with her childhood nurse, and they bestow upon her a profound ancient blessing. "Our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the gates of their enemies."
Finally, in verses 61 through 67, we get this incredibly beautiful resolution to the whole epic journey. The caravan travels all the way back.
Meanwhile, Isaac has come from Bir Lahai Roi and is living down in the Negev desert. One evening, Isaac goes out to the field to meditate. He looks up and he sees camels approaching in the distance. At the exact same time, Rebekah looks up, sees Isaac, and quickly gets down from her camel. She asks the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" When the servant says, "He is my master," she immediately takes her veil and covers herself, which is a traditional gesture of modesty and respect for her future husband. The servant then tells Isaac every single thing that happened on the trip. Then, Isaac brings Rebekah right into the tent of his mother Sarah. He marries her, she becomes his wife, he loves her, and the text ends with this beautifully emotional note that Isaac was finally comforted after his mother's death.
All right, Section 5, Clarifications. Let's look at the deeper meanings here.
So now that we have completed our chronological step-by-step walkthrough of all 67 verses, let's take a moment to really consolidate our understanding. First off, let's clarify the geography mentioned back in verse 10. The text says the servant travels to Aram Naharaim. In the literal pashhat reading of the text, this translates to Aram of the Two Rivers. This is a very specific historical region located all the way up in northwest Mesopotamia, nestled right between the upper Tigris and Euphrates rivers. I point this out because it highlights just how far the servant traveled. We're talking hundreds of miles across incredibly harsh terrain, all to fulfill his master's command and ensure Isaac did not marry into those local Canaanite tribes.
Next, let's summarize the main, simple themes of this chapter. What is truly remarkable here is the theme of divine providence working through totally everyday events. Notice there are no seas parting in this chapter. There are no burning bushes. Instead, God's will unfolds entirely through perfect timing, human agency, and the remarkable, undeniable character of Rebekah. It really emphasizes that keeping solemn promises, like the servant's unshakable oath to Abraham, and intentionally looking for genuine good character are exactly how divine blessings are practically realized in the real world.
And that brings us to Section 6, Practical Lessons, Applying the Text.
So how do these ancient, literal texts provide immediate, actionable value to our modern lives today? Well, the first massive lesson comes straight from the well. Think about it. The servant didn't pray for a woman who was just wealthy or well-connected or influential. He prayed for a strict test of character. Rebekah's actions teach us that proactive kindness, supreme hospitality, and a willingness to do really hard, unglamorous work, like drawing heavy water for hours for 10 stubborn camels, are the truest indicators of a good partner. When you are looking for someone to build a life with, or honestly, if you were just looking to improve yourself, focus on cultivating these deep, quiet traits of active generosity.
The second great lesson is found in the servant himself. This guy is an absolute masterclass in how to execute a mission. He is completely, unwaveringly faithful to his master's boundaries. He is incredibly focused. Remember, he literally refused to even take a bite of food after a grueling desert journey until he had delivered his message. And most importantly, he is deeply grateful. The very second he realizes he has succeeded, before he does anything else, before he celebrates or rests, he bows his head and thanks God. We can all learn to be a little more focused on our responsibilities and a whole lot quicker to show gratitude when things go right in our lives.
Okay, let's do a very brief recap to really cement this whole epic narrative in your mind. Abraham makes his chief servant swear a solemn oath to find a wife from his homeland, not Canaan. The servant travels hundreds of miles to Mesopotamia and devises this brilliant character-based test at the well. Rebekah passes it with flying colors by volunteering to water all his camels. The servant meets the family, recounts the undeniable providence of the entire journey, and secures their blessing. Rebekah courageously agrees to leave her family immediately, travels back across the desert, and marries Isaac, bringing him deep love and comfort.
As we wrap up this incredible story, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on today. The servant didn't demand that Rebekah water those camels. She volunteered. It was entirely unprompted kindness. So ask yourself today, what test of character are you passing or failing when no one is asking? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.